Today's video, I'm going to talk about reading the Rasi chart. So the Rasi chart represents Deha, which is the person's body, and the placement of their body in this world. So the path that their body is traveling. Part of having a body is your body is going to be surrounded by certain things in certain places, and the Rasi chart indicates those things as well. So when we analyze the Rasi, while you can analyze everything, it's important that you start with and focus in the critical things in the Rasi, because these are the things that are going to make or break the Rasi, okay? So the first house is a significant house in the Rasi, while the Sun, the Atmakaraka, which is the self planet, and the Lagna Lord are the critical planets. So these are known as self factors. The Lagna, or first house, the Sun, the Atmakaraka, and the Lagna Lord are all self factors that represent the individual and also the individual's body. So you can begin by analyzing the Lajitadiya Avashtas of these critical planets. If these planets have good Lajitadiya Avashtas, right away you know the person's body and path and personal well-being is going to be much more smooth, gentle, harmonious, and enjoyable. If they're in bad Lajitadiya Avashtas, it's going to be the opposite, and the person's going to have a very hard life, a hard road, and trouble with their body. So as for an example for this step number 1, let's look at Angelina Jolie's chart. Pulling up the Charakaras, we see that Venus is her Atmakaraka. So Cancer, the Lagna, the Sun, Venus, and the Lagna Lord Moon are the critical planets. So we can start by analyzing the Lajitadiya Avashtas of those 3 planets. Okay? So looking at the Sun, we see the Sun is very strong in itself with 226 points. It gets helped by its friend Moon to 49 points, its friend Mars to 72 points, and its friend Jupiter to 50 points. It's influenced by a neutral Mercury who's not going to make a difference. So the Sun is an awesome planet for her. So that gives her a great point in favor of her life coming together in a harmonious, solid, secure fashion, and also a very stable fashion. The Sun in the Rasi chart is really important because it gives stability to your existence. A bad Sun in the Rasi chart means you're just kind of like a piece of seaweed that's been uprooted from the ocean floor getting pushed along the beach and stepped on by people. Whereas a good solid Sun, keeps your life consistent, steadfast, and as a result gives you this long-term consistency and security. So it's the most important planet to have strong in the Rasi chart. Of course, these are all important, but you always want good, solid Karakas. Okay? Now for her, the Lagna Lord itself is the Moon. It's solid with 191 points. It gets boosted by the Sun to 0.6 points. Gets boosted by Mercury, its friend, to 6.1 points. And it gets boosted by Jupiter, joining it to 199 points. So this is a great Moon. Now the Moon, whatever the Lagna Lord is, you're going to get ahead due to the nature of that Lagna Lord if it's in good Lajitadiya Avashtas. And your life is going to lack consistency, lack success. You're going to find your place in you're going to find yourself in unhappy places if the Lagna Lord's in bad Lajitadiya Avashtas. But in accordance with the nature of the Lagna Lord. Here the Moon is the Lagna Lord. The Moon gets ahead because of adoration of others, due to social appeal, due to charisma basically. The Moon is the planet of charisma. People with a nice Moon have a lot of charisma, and as a result people want to help them, people want to give to them. People with afflicted Moons, they lack charisma, or they have a quality about them that people find unappealing, and as a result people are not inclined to just shower them with adoration and favors and make their life easy. Angelina Jolie has this nice Moon, so she's had a lot of great opportunities given to her, and of course in the eye of the public she's had a lot of adoration. So the Sun and Moon are great planets. Now the other planet we have to look at is Venus. Venus is the Atmakaraka. Its Lajitadiya Avashta, due to being in Cancer, is thirsty. So there's a big part of her that's extremely thirsty and experiences a lot of lack in life, even with the strong sun and moon. Venus is further thirsted by the sun to 27 points, and is thirsted by the moon to 191 negative points. So there's a lot of thirst. There's only a little bit of delight coming from Mercury, and Mercury is a benefic, so he's taken off 3 points of thirst, but still she's stuck with well over 200 points of thirst between the sun and the moon. Fortunately, Venus is in Cancer, a watery sign, where those influences of enemies, the sun and moon, ends up thirsting it instead of starving it. So it won't hold her back, it won't destroy success, it won't destroy being in good places, but she'll be feeling a constant lack in places. And it is a weakness in her chart. And Saturn normally would starve Venus, it's conjunct Venus, but in the Rashi, Saturn's sleeping, so he's not starving Venus, so she's fortunate there. But of the three critical planets, Venus is the one that's going to give her a sense of lack in her life. So when it came to counseling Angelina, it would all be talking about her fulfillment of her desires, which is what Venus is about. It would be all about counseling her to learn to make better choices in life. That cause would have long-term fulfillment, because whenever Venus is in a bad Logitati Vashta, you tend to not always pursue what you love and sometimes stay with what you're not happy with. Or you make choices that end up taking you away from what you really need and get you more into what you really don't need. But it's basically bad choices is what how Venus gets us messed up. Okay, but we'll get back to this Venus some more. But basically, with two solid important planets, those planets are going to have a lot of boosting ability to make her, Rashi chart strong. And a strong Rashi chart is consistency, steadiness in the areas of life that you're involved with, and feeling good about being there. A bad Logitati of these planets give you inconsistencies and instabilities in your place in the world, and bad experiences there. It's just that simple. Okay. Step 2 is the major focus of a person's life are indicated by the houses ruled by. So you want to find the major focus of a person's life. The planets in the Lagna indicate a major focus of a person's life, a major part of their path, and basically a major part of where their body will spend a lot of time. Because this is the chart of the Deha, the body. What's your body going to be spending time with? That's the question, and that's determined by these couple principles. The planets in the Lagna. The houses that the Lagna Lord, the Sun, and Atmakaraka are in. The house lords that join the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka. Those three things will indicate what your body is close to and spending time with, okay, as primary things. So in Angelina's chart, in Cancer, her Lagna, she's got Saturn and Venus. Saturn rules the 7th house, which is partners. Attached to Cancer, Saturn as 7th lord also represents foreign places. And she's had her body a lot in foreign places. And of course, relationships have always been a huge part of her life. Okay, from a young age onward, got married young, had more than 2 marriages, so we're hoping towards a 3rd. So relationships, her body being with the partner, is always going to be a major part of her life with this 7th lord there. Saturn's also the rule of the 8th house, which is the house of crises and unexpected changes. So her body will suffer those as well. Okay. Then the Lagna Lord is up here in the 10th. So that lets us know that power, status, will be big parts of where her body will be spending time. Okay. In leadership positions of power and authority. And of course, for an actress, Angelina has managed to do an incredible amount of stuff in the world, and she's really a young person still. So that's this moon in the 10th house. Then the sun, I forgot. I'm going to go back to the Lagna. I forgot Venus. Okay. Venus is the fourth lord in the first house. So she'll be spending time in what's comfortable, happy situations to her. Because the fourth lord in the first wants happiness and comfort. That can mean being attached to your home, having your body at home a lot, where Venus is. But home for her is represents foreign places too, due to this all being in Cancer, which we learned is a place of represents foreign places. But having her put in her body in places that she finds comfortable, and where she'll find happiness will be a big part of her life. So she knows how to be happy, basically. When you see the fourth lord in the first, people take the time to do things that make them feel comfortable and happy, as compared to some people who just can't even give themselves anything of comfort, as you'll oftentimes see. Then Venus is also the 11th lord, so her body will be involved with groups, with social situations, groups of people who have social, similar social ideas and things of that sort. Okay, and that Venus is part of her having started as 11th lord, a humanitarian fund. Humanitarian things are ruled by the 11th house when you try to help groups of people and so on. Okay, so we can see that being a focus of her life simply due to this Venus here. That also, 11th house is also the house of political parties, so there's also room for involvement with her in political movements and so on, all through this Venus. So those are the planets in the ascendant. Venus is also the Atmakaraka, and it's in the first house. Well, the Atmakaraka in the first house makes your body be with your body. What does that mean? That means it helps you be physically more able, more capable, physically more attractive. It basically gives you a body that you're better able to use in some ways. And of course, when it comes to Angelina, that's no doubt very true. For someone who made her career off, to some degree, her body, but also largely due to her attitude as well. Okay, the other planet is the moon, the Lagna Lord, and it's up here in the 10th. So again, as I mentioned, this is power, success, and this moon in the 10th is also the attitude that she brings of always being on top of the situation, because the 10th house is being on top of things, right? That has made her have the types of roles that she has. Okay. Then the sun, the third planet, is sitting in the 12th house. So when the sun's in the 12th, your body is spending a lot of time spending. So this always indicates a big spender, someone who's always giving money away or spending money or shoveling money out, because the 12th house is the house of expenses. So that's very true for her as well. Extremely charitable person, extremely giving person, and that's due to her sun and being in the 12th house. Okay. All right. Now we have to look at planets conjunct. Again, taken here. The planets in the Lagna, the houses that the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka are in. We looked at those. The house lords that join the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka. Okay. So, what house lords join the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka? The Atmakaraka Venus is joined by Saturn, the 7th and 8th Lord, which you've already talked about because it is in the Lagna. So that's a double emphasis. That makes this Saturn influence at 7th house, relationships, partnerships, and 8th house, crises, a double aspect of her body being involved in those. There'll be a lot of those. Then the moon is conjunct Jupiter, rules the 6th Lord and the 9th Lord. So being conjunct Jupiter, she'll be involved with teachers, philosophies, cultural ideals, which are 9th house things. As 6th Lord, the Lagna Lord joined with the 6th Lord makes the person connected to problems. And that sounds really bad, but it's actually a nice thing to have the Lagna Lord or any of these lords connected with the 6th Lord, in that sense that it gives the person the ability to solve problems through their intelligence and capabilities. Makes them a survivor, someone who can deal with things as they come, manage them, figure them out, and move on to success. It's a good yoga, actually. So 6th house is the house of improvements among the natural difficulties that are just part of life. And the Lagna Lord connected with that 6 makes the person tackle those difficulties in an adept way that allows them to have success, and basically they get ahead through their ability and intelligence. And it's also a mark of intelligence. Then the moon is also joined with Mars. Mars is the 10th Lord, so power, status, been big parts of her life, which is very true. First Lady of Hollywood for many, many, many years now. And a lot of more potential to come, probably, because she's still young. Okay, and so there's a double 10th house emphasis on the moon. Then the other thing is 5th house, children. Well, children are a huge part of our life, especially because Jupiter's there as well. She's adopted kids, she's had kids, you know, who knows what else she'll do with kids. She's made donations to help kids in third world countries and so on. So children, big, important emphasis on her life. Her body spends a lot of time with children. 5th house is also your creative intelligence. 6th house is your survival intelligence, we could say. Your intelligence to deal with the things that threaten your well-being and direction in life. 5th house is your creative intelligence. In fact, you could say the 6th house is why she makes such a good Tomb Raider, why she can always figure a way past the next obstacle, past the next trap. She does that with her intelligence. She figures it out. While all the other Tomb Raiders are about to do the thing that's going to kill everyone, she's the one who's figured out the right hole to stick the stick in or whatever. So, and that's a quality she would embody in actual life too, because it's in her chart with the moon with the 6th Lord. Now the 5th Lord represents creative intelligence. That's the intelligence to imagine and envision something through one's intelligence, and therefore to be able to create it. And so she's also has that creative intelligence very strong due to being conjunct to Mars. So lots of times she's spending a lot of time in creative endeavors. Okay. Then the Sun, the last planet, is joined with Mercury. Okay. And so the last planet, the Sun, is joined with Mercury. And the planets join the Sun are the least important of these planets for like giving an emphasis on life. The planets joined with the Yatmakaraka and the Lagna Lord are more important than the planets joined by the Sun. One of the reasons that is because any planet that joins the Sun gets sort of agitated and stressed. So of course the person is not going to spend the most time with that. And in fact, the sunny planet joined by the Sun is something a person's going to sacrifice to some degree in this lifetime, okay, in order to grow as an individual and spiritually. So this planet is never going to be as big of a, focus in a person's life or produce the type of success that the other planets would, okay, in most cases. Unless it's really strong or whatever. In Angelina's chart, Mercury is unusually strong by being in its own sign and retrograde. So she's going to have more Mercury influences than most people who are going to have Mercury conjunct the Sun. Again, the influences will be there, but they're usually not as big to the person as the planets conjunct the Makaraka and the Lagna Lord. All right, so with that said, hers is very strong by being retrograde and in its own sign. Mercury rules the 12th and 3rd house. So an extra emphasis on expenses, spending money, laying money out. So she can always think of the next thing to spend money on with that Mercury there. Then it's also joined the 3rd Lord. Well, the 3rd house has to do with acting, traveling, but it's the house of acting. It's the house of being involved with your skills. It's also a house of having success due to your skills and intelligence. It's another mark of intelligence. Okay, and of course Mercury is a big part of her life. She's involved in acting, a Mercury ruled career. Enough said on that. So now you've noticed I've sort of covered just about every house, right? Yes, I have covered every house pretty much except the 2nd house ruled by the Sun. Okay, and the reason is because Angelina chart's unique in that the Sun, Makaraka, or Lagna Lord is joined with all the other planets. You won't always find that. What that means is Angelina is the type of person that's going to be involved in everything. She's a heavily involved, extremely busy person. She's not a narrow person who gets involved in one or two things at the exclusion of other things. She's the humanitarian, the mother, the actress, the powerful career person, the partner to another person, the wife. She's like all these things, heavily involved in everything. And usually you don't see that, but I wanted to use her chart because of that, so you can get a taste of what a connection to each of these bhavas are, because we've pretty much connected all the bhavas now. Now, the only one we haven't talked about is, what if one of these planets is in the second lord is in the lagna, or the second lord is conjunct the lagna lord, or whatever? Then the person's going to be involved with wealth and holding on to things and preserving things. They'll be involved with things like collections. They'll be involved with family. Friends will be hugely important to them usually. So they'll be involved in those second house type things. Okay. And they'll oftentimes have a lot of responsibilities, meaning they'll take care of things. And I guess that's the best way of looking at the second house. It means you're going to take care of things. What are you going to take care of? You could take care of people. You could take care of friends. You could take care of family. You could take care of collections. Like you could have the stamp collection that when you die you pass on to a museum or something. So you can be involved in collections. And again, collections are something people take care of. So anything that you take care of and feel a responsibility towards is second house. Okay? So, as I mentioned, it's not always that you're going to see every planet connected to one of these three planets. All right? Angelina's chart's unique in that. So that's one reason I wanted to use hers. Now, this is such a simple technique, but imagine if somebody comes in and you don't know anything about them. And they've never spoken to you, and they come in and you say, oh, your lagna lord's in the second house, and so a lot of your life revolves around people and things that you take care of, that you feel responsible towards. And they'll go, that's right, my whole life revolves around the things I take care of. And they'll be amazed that at a glance you're able to see that. Okay? Once you know about this person, it sounds so simple you wouldn't even look it up because it's so obvious. Like Angelina, it's so obvious. Yeah, we all know she's involved in charity. We all know she has kids. We all know she's an actress. We all know that she's involved heavily in relationships. We all know she's super smart, and all those things. We know all that, so why would we bother looking at it? Well, imagine if you didn't know Angelina when she came in as a 12-year-old, and you rattled off these things and told her she was going to be involved in everything, heavily involved in everything and heavily invested in every area of life, and that she wasn't going to just focus on a few things at the exclusion of other things, which is not normal. Most people, I know from my life, I focus on some things, but I really exclude myself from many, many other things as well. So, it's a good solid technique to kind of see where the person's focuses are, where they're going to place their body, where their path lies, where their focuses are, what directions they're going to try to go. Okay? So that's the easy part. The next part is figuring out, are these places that their body is going, where they are going to be happy places, sorrowful places, successful places, or non-productive places? Okay? Well, starting with A, the planets in the lagna. The planets in the lagna will give the individual great cause for happiness or suffering in accordance with their Lajitadya Vashtas. So we have to look at their Lajitadya Vashtas and see if those planets are giving them desirable experiences to have their body and self around, or undesirable, basically. Because you can have your life revolve around relationships, but if they're horrid relationships, it's not going to be very nice, right? Okay, you want to be involved in great relationships. So let's just read those planets in lagna in Angelina's chart. Venus, as we've mentioned, is thirsty. It's not a great planet. Okay, that means it'll be hard for her to be happy. She'll be focused on trying to be happy with fourth lord in the first, but Venus, as we've seen, is thirsty. She's always going to feel a lack. She's always going to feel some emptiness, even while there's some good things. So it's going to be a struggle for her to feel really fulfilled and happy and delighted with things. There'll be this lack. undercurrent of lack and thirst underneath, as a thirsty planet gives. Saturn is also thirsty. It's sleeping. It's thirsted by the sun, moon, and Mars, especially by Mars at 200 points. So Saturn's thirsty too. So 7th house relationships, yes, she's not going to feel totally fulfilled in those. Okay, there'll always be an element of thirst, out of lack, element of need, unfulfilled. So I've been heavily involved in those areas. They're never going to be completely give her the abundant happiness that a person would want. Saturn is 8th lord. There is going to give her, crisis and changes that aren't crisis and changes that make her feel, wow, my life just got better unexpectedly. I can't believe, I thought this was a bad thing, and all of a sudden it's better than ever. It'll be like, geez, I went through that, and I'm still missing something. Then Venus as 11th lord, she'll be involved in group situations, but she'll feel a lack there. They won't fulfill all of her needs. So she does have a significant amount of thirst in her life, of not being completely fulfilled, even though living a golden dream of a life in so many ways. Okay? Now, the last thing we'll do is look at the dashas and analyze things in accordance with the dashas, and we have the ups and downs with these things. But that Venus and Saturn are there. Okay? 2 planets in not terrible Lagitati Avashtas, not destructive, but thirsty Trishita Lagitati Avashta, Venus and Saturn, are non-fulfilling Lagitati Avashtas. Okay? Alright. Then B, the houses that the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka are in. Okay. The houses that the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka are in will flourish or suffer on account of the individual's behavior in accordance with the Lagitati Avashtas of the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka. So if those are in good Lagitati Avashtas, they're going to cause the houses they're in to flourish, meaning the individual will cause those to flourish. Because again, the Lagna Lord, the Sun, and the Atmakaraka are the self, the individual. And its Lagitati Avashtas will show how they, as an individual, they themselves are responsible for making that house flourish or suffer. Okay? So starting with the Lagna Lord Moon, it's in a great Lagitati Avashta. Look at that. It's solid. It's totally boosted. Okay? As we've seen, it only is supported by Sun, just a bit, but Mercury and a lot of Jupiter, by 2 friends and Jupiter's conjunction. So that is a very delighted moon. So through her own will and energy and merit and abilities, through her own self, that moon is causing her to be delighted in her success and status and fame, all 10th house things. Okay, so this is things she did by herself, because it's the moon, the Lagna Lord, that's doing it to that 10th house. She's done it, no one else. Okay. Then the Venus, the Atmakaraka, is thirsty in the 1st house. Okay? Alright, so she has a lot of thirst that she's created in her own life due to her own lifestyle choices. Okay? Her fault. It's her Atmakaraka. It's not someone else's Karaka. It's her. Right? And 1st house is the body and the well-being of the body. Okay, she has done things to her body that haven't energized it, that haven't been good for it, that have left her body feeling a little drained and thirsty at times. Okay, not really the greatest choices in her life when it comes to her bodily maintenance at times. And of course we see that with her recent thing of having her breasts removed in order to avoid cancer possibly in the future. Well, there's lots of other ways to avoid cancer besides having major surgery, right? Okay. So, but those are her own choices. No one forced her to do that. So this Venus is not serving her body well. Okay. The final planet is the Sun. The Sun is great. It's influenced by 3 friends, Moon, Mars, and Jupiter. So yes, that means she'll make expenses, which the Sun in the 12th house will do, but expenses on good account. Expenses that make her feel great about spending the money and make her feel delighted and happy. Which means expenses on good account, expenses that somehow make things better or give something that's worth having, and then a person fulfills a desire and lets go of it, and then the expense is worth it. So expense is not a bad thing. It's only burning money that's bad. Good planets in the 12th are expenses that are good. Okay, you could take a lot of joy and delight in, which is very true for her. Okay. So 2 of the 3 self planets are causing happiness. Well, that's not bad. 2 out of 3. You know, and the 3rd one is not destructive totally. It's just thirsty. It's not fulfilled. Okay. Then C, the house lords that join the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka. Those are other things we had to analyze to see what a person's connected to. How do we analyze those? Well, C1 says, the house lords that join the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka will flourish and suffer and be a source of happiness or sorrow in accordance with their Lajitadiya Avashtas. So let's look at the house lords that join the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka. And we're just going to look at their Lajitadiya Avashtas. If they're good, then the person will be able to have more happiness due to being connected to those things. Because then they're being connected to happy things, right? If the Lajitadiya Avashtas of those planets are bad, the person is going to suffer on account of those things because they're connected to things that are suffering. Pretty simple. So the house lords that join the Atmakaraka, let's start with that. That's Venus over here. Or Venus is the Atmakaraka. The house lord that joins is Saturn. Saturn we see is thirsty. So they're connected to partners, Saturn, and partners are thirsty. So if you're connected to a partner that's feeling some emotional lack in their life, that's going to kind of perturb you a little bit. That means you're connected to someone who's less than ideally happy. Okay? Then Saturn's the 8th lord. Okay? 8th house, another thing we can look at is other people's money. That's another important thing about Saturn. Saturn connected is other people's money, which is somewhat thirsty, meaning not as much as hers. Okay? Which makes me wonder who makes more money, her or Brad Pitt. I'm going to, based on just this little thing without looking at any other Varga charts, I'm going to guess that she makes more money than Brad Pitt. I don't know. Be curious to look that up. Because there would be a little bit more lack there. So she's connected to other people's money, but there's a little lack in other people's money. And of course, the 8th house, as mentioned, is crisis and changes. She's connected to crisis and changes. And those changes will oftentimes bring some lack. Like, for instance, the whole 8th house is also surgeries, right? Surgeries that give a sense of lack. Well, that's happened in her life, right? Okay, now she's lacking her breast, which is cancer. So, you know, there's lack in her life due to this Saturn, unfortunately. Then looking at the moon, the planets joined it, Mars and Jupiter. Well, Mars is great, as we've seen. It's boosted by only friends and starred by Mercury, but just to 7 points. So slightly, it's not going to matter, especially when the moon is boosting it to 176 points and Jupiter boosts it to 180 points. It's an amazing Mars. So she's connected to her creative intelligence and children, and those are going to be great things because it's a good logita, it's a delighted thing. They'll be delighted, and it's great to be connected to delighted things. She's connected to power and success, 10th house things, and in a way that is delightful. You know, as a celebrity, as someone who makes people happy by their presence and power and success. Because you could be like, you could have a lot of power and success in a position where everyone hates you. And that, of course, wouldn't be nearly as you wouldn't be able to really take delight in that. You can have fame that, you know, where everyone hates you, and so it's not delighted fame anymore, is it? For her, it is. She's got this great Mars, only influenced by friends, so there's a lot of delight with Mars. Jupiter's also delighted. Again, the Sanskrit word for delight is what is it? Mudita avashta. But I'm just saying it in English to keep it easy. Jupiter's boosted by the Moon and Mars. Just hurt a little bit by Mercury by 3 points, but since Jupiter starts at 233, those 3 points, you really hardly won't even feel it. So she's connected to 6th and 9th house things, as we've talked about, and they're also going to be delightful and happy. So a lot of great planets. And of course, Mercury, while Mercury is starred by the Sun, he starts out okay at 79.6 points. Starred by Moon to 77 points. and then starved by the sun. So Mercury is somewhat less delighted. Okay, unfortunately, it's starved, or I'm sorry, the word I want to use is agitated, because it's influenced by this, joined the sun, and aspected by the moon, who's a malefic and an enemy. So Mercury has a lot of starvation on him, actually. He can barely withstand the moons, but the suns does agitate him. So this will indicate periods of frustration and agitation on account of expenses, and third house, the entertainment business, which is third house. Okay, and acting and that kind of stuff. There'll be some times of frustration, agitation with those things. Okay, let's see. Okay. Let me change this third rule a bit, with themselves. Okay. So, the house lords that the Amakaraka are joined with, as we mentioned in C1, are things that you're connected to. If you're connected to those things, you want those things to be happy. You want to be connected to happy people and happy things and happy situations. For instance, this Mercury, for instance, being agitated means at times she'll be connected to very frustrating entertainment things and frustrating expenses. It's much nicer to be connected to enjoyable ones, right? Okay. All right. However, those planets, not only connected to those things, those planets are going to influence us. They're going to influence our sun, our Lagna Lord, and our Atmakaraka. And they're going to directly delight us or cause us to have suffering and agitation and misery. Okay, so you can be with a person, and how are they going to make you feel? You can be connected to a job. How does that job make you feel? You can be connected with a kid, a child. How does that child make you feel? How do they treat you? What influence? How do they push you? And so on. And for that, we need to look at the Lagitade Avashta effect of those planets to the Lagna Lord, Sun, and Atmakaraka. Okay? So in Angelina's chart, for instance, the moon is her Lagna Lord. Jupiter is influencing the moon, and Mars is influencing the moon in a big way. She can't get away from Jupiter and the moon because they're part of her destiny, her path, because she's with them in the same house. Is Jupiter influencing the moon for good or bad, and is Mars influencing the moon for good or bad? So we go to the moon's column in the Avashtas, and we see that Mars is blue. Mars is a neutral to the moon, so he's not going to starve or delight moon. So ignore him. Jupiter, the other planet conjunct that moon, is boosting it to 199 points and giving the moon a lot of delight. So she delights in her ability to use her intelligence to overcome obstacles and to get ahead and have a great life. And she delights, she feels great about herself due to her ability to, for her philosophies and her cultural ideals and philosophical ideals. Those things all boost her into feeling really good about herself because they're friends of the moon. Okay? Mercury is a neutral to the sun. So we look at sun here, we go to Mercury, it's blue, neutral. So we ignore that. The Mercury is not going to make her feel better about herself or worse. Okay? It's just something she's connected to. Then Venus is the Atmakaraka, and it's joined by Saturn. Well, Saturn is Saturn is starving Venus. It would be, except it's sleeping, so it's not. Good thing for her. Otherwise, Saturn could be causing her to have a lot of misery coming directly, feeling miserable about herself due to her partners. But luckily, Saturn is sleeping here. Again, we would want to fine-tune all this through the Vargas too, but as a general path, luckily that Saturn's sleeping, that it's not starving Venus actually. Okay? Otherwise, partners could be very devaluing to her. As it is, they're not. Okay? Alright, so step 3. It's also extremely important to analyze all the important bhavas in respect to all the influences they receive from all the grahas. These bhavas influenced by good Lajitati avastas indicate that the individual's time spent with those bhavas is productive. So, you're spending time with the bhavas that your self planets are in, with the bhavas of the things in your lagna, and with the bhavas of the planets that you're joined. So you're be spending more time with those bhavas. In Angelina's chart, that means all the bhavas, because her planets are connected to everything. And the sun, who's not connected to the second house is ruled by the sun, which is one of the self planets. So she's still connected to that house. So being connected to all those bhavas means how good those bhavas are. It has a lot to say with the stress and trouble they're going to have in your life, right? And those are going to be indirect stresses and troubles. The bhavas that the planet's in, and the ones we just analyzed in these steps here, A, B, C1, and C2, those are direct stress. You're confronted with those directly. The other bhavas are in your life, but they're not going to necessarily connect you directly. Like, for instance, let's take her fifth bhava, which is children. She's connected to children because of Mars, as we've seen, being with the moon. Those children are going to be good to her because Mars is, not necessarily good to her, it's neutral. They're not going to be particularly good to her nor bad to her. But we've seen Mars is in good Lajitati avastas. So those children in general are going to be going about in ways that her connections to them are fulfilling and happy. But then the children themselves, the lagna for the children, the fifth house, could still have some afflictions, and they may go through some things that cause her to have some grief and suffering depending on what's going on with that house. So looking at here, we can look to the fifth bhava and look at all the planets influencing it. The sun helps it. There's no negatives. The moon helps it. Mars helps it. Mercury helps it. Jupiter helps it. Venus and Saturn hurt it. So there's a little bit of thirst on that fifth bhava, which means at times her children will go into, periods of their life where they're thirsty, they're feeling a lack, but not destructively so. But that's going to be a more important bhava to analyze this way because she's connected to it more. So basically, you're analyzing the well-being of the bhavas that you're connected to, because those the well-being of those bhavas, if you're connected to them, you'll witness it and see it and have a reaction to it. Now, instead of analyzing all 12 bhavas, which we could do for her, what I'm going to actually just do is analyze the bhavas that she's most strongly connected with, which are basically the bhavas that the sun, Atmakaraka, and Lagna Lord are in, because you're never getting away from those bhavas. Those are direct. Sure, she's connected to the fifth Lord Mars, but that's different. That's a slight step away from being in the fifth house, where you're with it all the time. Okay? So we're going to check the 10th house, the 12th house, and the first house to see how those houses are doing in general, because those are the houses that she's stuck in the most. All right. So starting with the first house, which of course is the most important house in this chart. And then okay. Okay. Forgot to mention one step, which I'll write in here in a minute. Actually, I'm going to tell that right now. Okay. Okay. It's so obvious, I forgot to write it down. So the first house is a significant house in the Rashi. So it's extremely important to analyze the first bhava in respect to the Lajitati influences of the planets that influence the first bhava cusp. Because the Lagna is their body. It's their concrete physical body. Remember, the bhava cusps are always the concrete thing. We always want to analyze that in every chart, whether there's a Karaka in there, whether the Lagna Lord's in there, whether the Sun or Amakaraka is in there, whatever. Always analyze the first bhava. That's the important bhava here. So here we see the sun is making the first bhava steady and consistent. So that'll give her more consistency in her health and consistency in her life's path, because it's in good Lajitadiya Vashta. If the sun was in bad Lajitadiya Vashta, it would give inconsistencies in those. The moon's in good Lajitadiya Vashtas and influences the first to a lot of points, 118 points on average, which means that the person will be adaptable and changeable as necessary in order to find the path of least and best resistance, or the least resistance that leads to the best results. That's what the moon does, lets you adapt and evolve. So she'll adapt and evolve according to need to make things work to her greatest favor through that moon. Mars influences the first house positively as well, with only good points. Again, it loses 5 points under Mercury, but doesn't matter because it still has 153 points. So that shows that courage will support her path, adventure, sense of adventure, a proper use of her will and logic will all support her physical well-being and direction in life. Mercury barely influences the first house. Under the sun, it hurts it a bit. So this means sometimes some bad planning can cause some frustrations, but it's a minor influence. It's hardly to be considered. Jupiter influences strongly to 197 points of his own, and that gets boosted sometimes well over 300 under the moon and Mars. So Jupiter's really fortunate here. And Jupiter basically gives you life. It gives you luck and fortune and makes things lucky for you. So she has luck to help her physically well-being and luck to help her in her path in life, and just goodwill. And when she makes mistakes or does something wrong, usually Jupiter will keep her afloat still. So Jupiter's the planet that when you're in trouble or you do something, make a mistake, it's Jupiter that keeps you going forward and successful anyway. Okay, and that super strong Jupiter influence shows that she could create a lot of errors in her life and still have a great path in her life. And she's done some really stupid things. She's had very poor judgment in some of her things in life, but due to that Venus-Saturn conjunction largely. But she still managed to, through good, through the blessings of Jupiter basically, to do that. Now Jupiter represents merit that's used to help you in times of need. So when you make a mistake and you're in need, or you get into trouble and you're in need, you have merit, and that merit can get you out of trouble, and that's the blessings of Jupiter. And she has abundance of that to help her. All right, the Venus and Saturn are both thirsting her first house. So this means at times her body feels lack, just physically. At times she feels a lack of fulfillment along her path, as we've talked about. But it's always good to analyze that Lagna Bhava. And usually I analyze it, and the reason I forgot it, because I analyze it as part of all the important bhavas. Okay? All the above important bhavas in respect to all the influences they receive from all the grahas. Well, all of the above important bhavas is the first bhava. So we got to analyze that completely. Okay? In fact, I would say starting with the Lagna Bhava. Okay? But then you also want to look very closely at the other important houses. Well, the Lagna is important because that Makaraka is in it. We've looked at that. The 12th is important due to the Sun in it. And the 10th is important due to the Lagna Lord in it. So let's start by looking at the 10th completely. Okay, the 10th house is influenced by good Lajitadiya Vashta, delighted Moon, delighted Mars, delighted Jupiter, all very strongly. It's hurt under the Sun a little bit by agitated Mercury. So some minor details will irritate her at times in respect to her career, and but they're going to be minor. Venus is thirsting it, and Saturn's thirsting it. Saturn's thirsting it a lot more. But again, it's just thirst compared to all this delight. So that 10th house is extremely delighted. And yes, while sometimes Saturn and Venus will cause a little bit of lack there, overall, she's going to have a lot to be delighted for at that great 10th house. The sun is in the 12th bhava. So how's that bhava look? Well, it's delighted by the sun, delighted by the moon's aspect, delighted by Mars' aspect, delighted by Jupiter's aspect. It's a great 12th house. A lot of expense on good account. Where there's problems is a little bit under Mercury, okay, being agitated by the sun. So sometimes some bad planning, creating her to have some agitations, but nothing that all these great positive numbers are not going to be able to just work out. It's a great 12th house. So even the first house, which is the worst house there as far as holding the worst planets, Venus and Saturn, it's still overall a delighted house. So she's going to be delighted in her path. She's going to be delighted in her body because of that good Venus. But still, yes, there'll be some lack there with Venus and Saturn being thirsty. So anyway, it's a really powerful chart, needless to say. So after we do all that, things are going to be dasha dependent. And this is where it gets tricky when you start doing the dasha dependent things. As Parashar says after he talks about bhava judgment, he says in addition to this, we need to look at the effects of yogas. Like for instance, we've seen in Angelina's chart that Venus is not a good planet. It's thirsted in her Rashi. Yet Venus period is when she had all that success. Okay, how can that be? Okay, how can it be that Venus period gave her all that success? Well, first of all, if you go to the formula for yoga judgment course, I use her chart a lot, and I show all the yogas that Venus is involved with and why Venus did give success. Okay? And in accordance with yogas, Venus is doing much better. Also, let's look at the Shayanati Avashta of Venus. In Venus Dasha, Venus was in Vicheshta, which means those numbers we saw, those thirst numbers, were going to be barely visible because Venus is in Vicheshta, which means those strong yogas weren't going to get held back as much by a bad house lord, basically. If Venus had been in Cheshta Avashta, then there would have been a lot more lack in Venus period, and that would have taken away from the enjoyment of the yogas, because if you have lack, you can't enjoy the good things as much. But she was actually fortunate that Venus was Vicheshta in Venus Dasha, because it was not a good planet. Okay? So the point I'm making is you also want to analyze yogas. The Rashi chart is the chart for yogas. So to completely analyze the Rashi chart, that means analyzing the yogas. And so the formula for judging the formula for judging yoga's course is basically the second part of analyzing the Rashi chart. So we just did the first part. The second part is the analyzing of the yogas, which are building the Rashi chart. The Rashi chart is built by the yogas. Okay? So we did that extensively on Angelina's chart, which is another reason why I wanted to use this as this example. So if you haven't seen that course, go take it. If you have taken it, maybe go review Angelina's stuff so you can see the importance of yogas. Okay? Now, in the Rashi chart, I want to talk a bit about dashas. Well, the most important dashas, of course, are going to be the dashas of planets in the Lagna, right? Of planets, of the Lagna Lord, the Sun, and the Atmakaraka. Those are the most important dashas in a person's life. Well, for Angelina, we can easily analyze that because Venus, Sun, and Moon are all happening next. She had Venus Dasha, she's running Sun Dasha, and she'll run Moon Dasha. So we can analyze each of those dashas. So I'm just going to break this down. She had Venus Dasha. Venus showing a lot of lack. Luckily, the Shayanati of Venus is Vicheshta, so a lot of that lack is really not going to be visible. Instead, Venus is just going to give all of its yogas, which there being a lot of, she had a lot of success. Then in the Sun Dasha, which started 2013 and runs for just about 6 years, Sun's in great Lajitadya Avasthas. So this is showing her feeling extremely delighted about expenses and charities. Here are this and 12th house things, right? And second house things, which is wealth. However, the Shainadi Avastha under the Sun Dasha of the Sun is Vichashta. So again, the major effects of the Sun are going to be due to what the Sun's doing in other Vargas and the yogas it's forming in the Rashi chart. So she's not going to have in the Sun Dasha all that delight. She had that delight under Venus Dasha, okay, during which she started all those charitable things. She had some of that delight under Ketu Dasha even, that giving quality. But in the Sun Dasha, that delight's going to be minimal. Instead, what the Sun will delight in is going to be determined in the other Vargas, and also she'll, of course, get the yogas. In the Moon Dasha, well, the Moon is extremely delighted and give her a lot of power. Moon in the 10th, Lagna Lord in the 10th, and a lot of social appeal. Because Moon in 10th is, Gandhi had Moon in 10th, and everyone loved Gandhi practically. Well, because of her Moon in the 10th is why everyone loves her too. Now, it's really funny, I find, she's just well loved by both men and women alike, okay? Adored by many, many people because of that Moon in the 10th. So Moon Dasha has a lot of promise for that adoration to grow and her to acquire more power and status. And let's check the Shainadi Avastha of the Moon. In the Moon Dasha, the Shainadi Avastha is Cheshta, and it's approaching. So that's great. So those great points of the Moon that we see of 200 under Jupiter, all the Moon by itself 191 is going to give her a tremendous amount of social appeal and success and power. And then we want to analyze the yogas on top of that. But based on just the Rashi analysis, without yogas, the Moon Dasha is more promising for power and status and being adored than is Venus Dasha. Okay, then was Venus Dasha. A Moon Dasha starts in a few years, in December 24, 2018. So this is a period where I think her public life is going to expand beyond Hollywood, and she will have an amazing amount of success and power. This is really an extremely powerful chart. So let's see what the Moon Dasha brings. Sun Dasha will bring its yogas, the Moon Dasha will bring its yogas, and all this delight to the 10th house. Okay? Alright, so that's the basic way you can read a Rashi chart. I spent, 57 minutes doing this. So a lot of it was explaining the technique. So this could take up about half an hour of a reading if you just pick out these focal points of a person's life and talk about where they're going to be happy or unhappy. Basically, you're picking out the happy focal points and the unhappy focal points, and then quickly looking at the dashas that are going to bring more of the happy and more of the unhappy. And you can look at the antardashas too, of course. Okay? Alright, I'll be doing another video on Rashi